Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here. Again, as Roberto said, my name is Michelle Gaudette. I am an analytics consultant with Interworks, and I have been doing data visualization for a little while. I travel around teaching people how to use Tableau. So today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to have some fun working in Tableau, and I will admit to you that I usually use the desktop version of Tableau, but we're going to be adventurous today, and we're going to use Tableau Public. And that's going to give everybody the opportunity to download the app, use it without the commitment of purchasing the software. And Tableau Public, the free version, is actually a really robust software tool. So it gives you an opportunity to get your hands dirty with some data visualization and figure out, how much you like it, what you can do with it. So I guess let's go ahead and kind of get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Jaime, do you mind turning my video off so that we can have the full view of the screen? Thank you. All right. Okay. So I provided on Tableau Public a workbook that you can download. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, no worries, you can get to it at any point and download it. And once this video has been released, you can go through and do the practice it with us and follow along at that point. When you go to Tableau Public, this is a view of my page. This is my public profile page. And when you go to this view, you can actually click on the analysis blank, and it'll take you to these instructions, tell you what to do. It'll also give you a link. And actually, this is a new link. I apologize to anybody who downloaded before today. I realized that I had not included this link. This link actually goes to my Google Drive and will give you the Excel document that we're connecting to. Okay? So this is where you'll get the workbook. When you download the workbook, you'll download the workbook by clicking the little download button, and it'll load it into wherever you've got your default download set for your computer. And at that point, you'll just open up your Windows Explorer and go to probably your downloads, and it should live right there at the top. Okay, and then when you open it, you'll have access to this view. Okay, now one of the things that's interesting about Tableau Public, you have the data that I have put into the workbook, and you have access to that data. However, when Tableau Public publishes, let me close that, when Tableau Public publishes a workbook that you create, it's going to take a snapshot of the data that you use. Okay, and that snapshot is going to be converted into a hyper file, which is basically it's an extract of your data, but it's a snapshot of the data at that particular point in time. And this is going to allow Tableau to really kind of look for and house that data in a very efficient way. What this means is that if you went into your workbook and you wanted to see this connection, this data connection, if you click on your Datasource tab, you're going to be asked where that data file is. So that's why I provided that Excel file for you. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. Let's look really quickly. I'm going to pull this up, so feel free to just kind of watch my screen for a minute. This is the Excel file, and if you are familiar with the FIFA data set, it exists in numerous places. It's on Kaggle, it's on Data World, it's in a whole bunch of Tableau Public workbooks. So this is the data that I am using today, but I've kind of transformed it. So I took some of the information. This is pretty much the original data set, but I've done some things like break out some of the player positions into different, this is their first choice or first preference position, second preference position. It came in a string of string characters, a list of string characters separated by commas, and I divided those out. And so I have that kind of divided out for us already. But you'll notice that we've got some scores across the top in our headers, and then we have the data values for those scores. Okay, so this is the primary data that we're going to be using. I also created a couple of other things, kind of like ways to categorize some of the data, the skill types based on the website that the data actually came from. The different names of the ratings that the players were rated on. So things like crossing and finishing, their accuracy when they were doing headers, and then I kind of labeled them into either specific scores or position scores. Okay, and so some of these scores were related to their strength in a position, if they were a center back or a striker, right? If they were a striker, then what score they received for their particular position. So I divided those two score types up, and that just gives me another way of looking at my data when it's time. I also took the URLs just in case anybody's interested in having those, and I put those in another sheet. And then you'll notice that I have one more sheet called Pivoted Ratings. Now again, if you downloaded this workbook beforehand, don't worry, you'll have access to that Excel file. You can download it again. It's now on the current published view of my on my profile page. But I wanted to just kind of give us a real quick overview. The reason that I have this pivoted ratings data, I want to point out these rating names, those are actually the headers of our scores. All right. So if I look across the headers for my data, I can see the different, I've got my goalkeeper diving scores and handling scores, my free kick accuracy, and I took those headers and I converted them into a tall data set instead of a wide data set. And the reason for that is that Tableau really likes tall data. All right, so this last sheet is this converted or pivoted data set. Okay. All right, so just wanted to give you kind of an overview of what the data look like in that Excel sheet. When you open up Tableau for the very first time, you are typically going to land on this landing page. And I want to do a really quick orientation just to kind of get everybody on the same page, make sure that we all know where we are in Tableau. So this landing page is going to give you several opportunities. Over in the right-hand side of the screen, we have kind of the discovery pane. All right, this discovery pane is going to give you access to various training videos, how-to videos. It's a really robust resource for learning. Okay. You also have access to some inspiration, which I love that Tableau does. Tableau provides this viz of the day. They nominate a data visualization that has recently been posted, and they put it out for the Twitter community and the Tableau community in general to see and celebrate, and it's a really great opportunity. So if you get a visit of the day, it is an amazing it's an amazing feeling. So these are really great visualizations to look at for some inspiration. And then we also have some data sets. Now these are helpful because we've got sample data sets. This is data that you can pull and play with. And then a whole bunch of blogs. So lots of resources for learning. So even after today, you've got access to all of this. In addition to that, on the left-hand side, we have our connection pane. And in Tableau Public, you do have a smaller number of connections that you can make. In desktop version, you're going to end up seeing quite a bit more, especially on the server side. But the important piece is that we have access to various Excel files. We can connect to text files like CSVs, JSON files if you are into those types of data structured files. We can even pull things out of PDF. So that's kind of an interesting. If you are into GIS, you can do spatial files. And if you like stats, you can pull statistical files. All right, so we have lots of different options. The original data that I created came from that Excel file. And so if I were going to create a new data connection, and again, you already have that data connected in your workbook, but if I were going to connect to a new data source, I would just click on that link, the one that the file type that I want to connect to. So I clicked on Microsoft Excel, and it allows me to look through my my file explorer to find an appropriate file. So if I click on this is just a dummy slide coordinate data set. There's not really anything in it, but if I click on this and click open, Tableau is going to take me to a data connection view. Okay? If you only have one tab in your data, it is going to automatically connect to that data. So if it's a CSV file or an Excel sheet or an Excel workbook that only has one tab, it'll go ahead and connect to that data and give you a preview. Okay, like I said, this data, there's not really anything in it, but I just wanted to show you that since Tableau Public pulls an extract. Okay, now really quickly, when you download your Tableau workbook, you are going to have this packaged workbook that you download. And you have the opportunity, you actually can do this if you wanted to, you could unzip that packaged workbook, which is what I did in order to get to this hyper file, which is what's driving my view. This is where my FIFA data has now been packaged up into this hyper file instead of an Excel, and this is what Tableau is now connecting to. Okay? All right, let me minimize that. I'm going to go ahead and close this connection because I don't need it. Actually, I'm going to hit the undo button. There we go. All right, so let me go back to my connections pane. Once I've connected to that Excel file, and Tableau has taken me to my data source connection. I should have left that open for a second. All right. Now it's trying to connect to the FIFA. All right, so this is actually how the FIFA looks without the little exclamation points. But it's going to, let me see. Let me jump back over. That's what I should have done. That. Okay. So it gives me that sheet connection, the preview of my data, and then when I click over to a new sheet, I have the data connection showing up in my data connections pane. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. I'm going to go back to this data source view really quickly and just kind of explain a couple of things we see here. We have this preview, and again, this is just that dummy data. We have this preview, and this preview is going to give me some options. I actually could see the data type for each one of my fields. I have, this is a numeric value, and so I have this little number symbol. Let me magnify that a little bit. There we go. So we have this little number symbol that lets me know that I have a number type. And I can change that. I could change it from a whole number to a decimal. If it's actually a date, I could switch it to a date, or I can make it a string or a boolean if Tableau has brought it in incorrectly and it's not actually a number field. Okay, but you'll see the different types of icons to let you know what type of data we have. To get to a sheet from this data connection, all I do is click on one of the sheets that's down at the bottom. And now I'm connected to the data that I have highlighted in gray in my data connection window. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to go in and close this so that we can focus in on our FIFA data. Okay. So if you are following along with me in the workbook, this is what you should see. When you open your workbook, it should show you a connection up in the top. All right. And this area right here is called the data pane. So we have this data connection and it is going to give you the name of the data source, and it's going to name it something to let you know that there are multiple tables. Okay, and right now you can see that I've got mine organized into folders, and so I've got it organized by club info, player info, and then position ratings. I also could click this little drop down arrow right here. Okay, this little drop down arrow is going to give me the option of changing it from folder view to table view. So if you're following along, let's go ahead and do that. Click on that little drop down arrow at the top of that data pane. It's next to your search bar, and this little, we'll talk about this icon in just a second, this little data view icon. Go ahead and click on Group by Data Source Table. So what I want to show you is that in that Excel file, we had that FIFA 18 transformed data, which is the first tab. And here are those data headers, and here are the data headers that go along with them. Okay? And we have an expandable menu for each one of those tables that were in that workbook. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to folder view. I find it a little bit easier to deal with. Okay. All right, one last thing I want to show you about this little data pane, for right now anyway, is we have this view data button, this icon. All right, if I click on this, Tableau is going to give me another way of viewing my data. Now, notice I couldn't access this FIFA data in my data source tab because I'm on an extract, but I can access it using that little icon. So it's going to pull up a preview section or a preview of that data, right? And I get each one of those fields that I would have seen in my Excel document, even though I don't have access to that Excel document. All right, so I can look at each one of those tabs in the Excel file. Okay, let's build a chart. Let's go ahead and jump right in and let's build something. So let's say that I've gotten hold of this data. Somebody else has already maybe cleaned it for me. They've done something to it. It could be one table with just, really simple data, or it could be like this, multiple tables that have been merged together, joined together, and create, to create a more complex data set for me to look at. So I have various fields. And up here I can see I've got one under club info. So if I click that little expand arrow right next to the folder icon on my club info, I can see that I've got a field called club. And if I hover over it, it's blue. If I look to the left of it, I can see, let me do the magnifier again. If I look to the left of it, I can see a little icon that says ABC. And that's to let me know that this is actually a string field. Okay? So when I put this field on my view, I'm going to expect a list of names, club names, all right, or some text. So let's left click on the club field and let's drag that up to our rows shelf. Notice that the rows and the columns both get highlighted in orange. And that orange is to let me know that that's an available place for me to drop a field. So if I drop a field on rows, there are quite a few rows. So it's going to ask me if I want to add all of the members or if I want to filter. If you're working with millions of rows, you probably want to filter. We only have I think a couple hundred of the club member or the club names, and then a couple thousand of the players. So I'm going to go ahead and add all members. And when I do that, I get this list of the various clubs within the FIFA organization. Now I can see that it is organized in a way, right? And Tableau is going to automatically alphabetize this list of strings. That is the data source default. So if I look at this, I can see that I've got some number ones up at the top, and then I've got some A's, and then I've got, if I scroll down, I'd get to B's, but this is alphabetized right now. So when I drop strings on a view, I'm going to get an alphabetized list. Let's take this club total overall rating. This is another field in my data, and it is showing up as green, and we're going to talk about what that means in just a second. But let's left click on that. I can tell that it's a number, right? I'm going to left click on this club total overall rating, and I'm going to drag that up to my columns. There are a couple of things that happened. I just dropped a field onto my columns shelf, and I got a bar chart. And that's as quick and easy as it is to build your basic bar chart. I can take some measure, some value, data value, and I can put it on my columns shelf, and I can get a horizontal bar chart. All right, so this is telling me that the sum, this is my aggregation on my measure. If I magnify, you can see that this measure, that club total overall rating, this is aggregated to sum. So it's taking all of those values and it's adding them up. And it's giving me the total sum for each one of the clubs on my list. Now this order is not very meaningful. It doesn't really help me find out anything about this data. I can hover over each one and I get a tooltip, and that tooltip is going to give me the overall rating sum for the Heidenheim, which is 1730. So that means that all of those scores added up together for each one of the players on their roster is going to give me that 1730 as the value. But I don't really have anything visually that gives me any indicators of importance, or, you know, which one is the top, who has the most, which one is the least. So that's where that data visualization kind of kicks in. This is where we start thinking about how we want to present information to our end users. What is it that we want them to see? I want to see what the biggest number is. You know, who's got the largest overall rating? So I've got these two buttons right up here in the top in my toolbar. Okay, there's one that looks like an upside down staircase. That's how I see it anyway. So if you look at the one that looks like an upside down staircase and you click on that button, that's a sort button, and it's going to take your values and it's going to sort them from big to small. So now I can see that Manchester United has our largest overall rating. So taking all of their players and adding their ratings together for their overall rating, right? The player's overall rating. I take those and I add them all together, and I get that 2564 as that value. I can also click the little stair step next to it, and I can sort ascending. And if I do that, I can see that the Bray Wanderers have the smallest or the least overall rating, right, at 1181. So this gives me a little bit of information about my clubs. I can see who's got the most and who's got the least. But I want to kind of dig in a little bit deeper. So let's play around, and I'm going to come back to this club because it's actually bringing up a question for me. I want to make sure that I'm looking at my clubs kind of in a normalized way, because these numbers make me suspect, right? So we're going to come back to this in just a minute. Let's first start a new sheet. I want to dig around in this data set a little bit. So let's start a new sheet. There are three little buttons down at the bottom of your view, and they are right next to the last sheet in your tabs. So right now you can see that I've got sheet 1, sheet 2, and then I've got these three little buttons. Okay, so click on this first one. It looks like a little chart with a plus, and that's going to give us a new worksheet. Next to that, we have the new dashboard, and then we have the new story. And I'm going to give you some, when I upload, and actually I meant to say this, I'm going to upload this finished workbook to my Tableau Public also. So you'll have the blank workbook, and then you'll also have a solutions workbook or a finished workbook. And I'm going to include some additional resources to help out with some additional learning. So things like how to build dashboards and how to use the stories. So I'll include that. Let's go ahead and start a new worksheet though. So click on the new worksheet and you'll get a new worksheet that pops up in your tabs. Mine is sheet 3. Let's go ahead and expand this player info. Okay. This player info, like the club info, it's kind of organized by some information that might be relevant about the clubs themselves. The player info is kind of a little section that organizes the information specific to the player, not necessarily the club. So what I can do here is I can look and I can see that I've got names. That's probably player names. I have some age information. I've got an ID number, and I have some nationality information. So let's play around with this a bit. I'm going to take this name field, and again I see that that's an ABC icon. That tells me it's a string. I'm going to take this name field and I'm going to drop it on rows. All right. Now, again, I have quite a few. There's 17,000 something, 600, I think. And I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, go ahead and give me all of the members. And I get this list of all of the players. Oh, not quite 17,000. If you look down in the bottom corner of your workbook, you actually have a summary tab that will tell you how many marks you have on your view. And your mark is going to be each data point that shows up on your view. So right now I've got 16,746 marks or rows, right? And then eventually when I put data in here, any value, I'm going to end up with another column of data. So we have 16,000 names, and let's take and just add a little bit of information. I want to see kind of, how many or what nationality maybe some of them are. And so let's take nationality and let's put that on rows also. Okay. And I can see that Abbas has 2 nationalities listed, and it probably just needs some data cleaning. We've got Heti, I'm probably saying his name wrong, sorry, and he's listed as Albania and Switzerland. So again, we've got some data cleaning that needs to happen, but we have these nationalities that are listed. This row level view is not really all that helpful. But watch what I can do. I've got a row or a column of nationality, and I have a column of names. And if I flip the order of these two, so I'm going to click on nationality, that field up on my rows shelf. I'm going to click on nationality and I'm going to drag it in front of name. And when I do that, instead of getting a name with a nationality, now I get the nationality with those names that are a member of that group. Okay, so this is a dimension level or a dimension hierarchy. And I can see that I've got nationality, and Afghanistan has got 3 players listed. Now, I would have to scroll down pretty far and then do a manual count to figure out how many players represent each nationality. However, if I right-click on this name field, I have a couple of choices. Right-click is always your friend. Rule number 1 is right-click. So if you have a question, you want to do something and you're not quite sure where to click, then right-click. A lot of times you'll get a hint or even the step that you want to take. All right, so here I can see that right now, name is listed as a dimension, and we're getting ready to talk about what that means. But I also could switch it to a measure, and if I do that, I have a couple of options here. I can find the min, which right now there's no value on it, so it is just going to give me the first in the alphabetical list. The max would be the last in the alphabetical list. I can do a count, but if anybody is listed more than once, it's going to count them more than once. Or I can do a count distinct, and that's going to look for every single name and count it 1 time. Okay, so I'm going to do a count distinct on name. And this is not a very helpful view because my bar is going the wrong direction, but I'm going to move it to columns, because if I put a measure on columns, I get a horizontal bar. And now I get a count of the number of players for each country. And I can, again, sort these. Okay. So once again, I right-clicked when it was a blue dimension. Okay. Oops. Right-clicked when it was a blue dimension, and I moved that to a measure and chose discrete or count distinct. So once I did that, I'm now going to go and do this sort. So I'm going to sort this highest to lowest, and I can see that England has 1,540 players represented in all of the different clubs. All right. So this was kind of a cool, I have, basically just descriptive data, and I've already started getting a little bit of a count. So that's pretty cool to me. I can do all kinds of explorations with my data and figure out what is in my data set before I really even have to learn too much about how Tableau even works. So here I am, and I've now already figured out that England is a high contributor to players, right? All right, so let's play around. I want to show you a couple of other things. If I want to keep this, let's say that I'm doing an exploratory analysis and I am just building chart after chart after chart so that I can figure out what's going on, right? I may not want to show all of these to my end users. They might just be for me to figure out what's in the data, in which case I still need to know what they are, what each chart is. So I'm going to double click on this tab down here where it says sheet 3. If I double click on it, it's going to highlight it and I can change the name. So I'm going to call this one, let's see, distinct count of players by nationality. Okay? Distinct count of players by nationality. Now watch what happens to the title area when I say enter. I'm going to hit enter. And that tab becomes the title for my chart. Now, this is a really nice feature. It allows me to keep track of not only what I'm doing as I'm working, but also it allows me to just have a basic title in my chart. So as I'm clicking through, or if I decide to show this chart to someone, I actually already have the beginnings of a good title. Okay? All right. So we now know that England is a high contributor. Let's see what else I could investigate. Let's see if there, you guys do a lot of histograms, so let's make a histogram, right? I want to see how the players' ages are distributed, okay? So let's start a new sheet. I am going to click on my little new sheet button. All right, and let's go ahead and name this one. That way I don't forget to do it, because I'm really good at telling people best practices and how to do it, but in my practice I am terrible at following my own advice. So do what I say and not what I do, and let's go ahead and do this the right way. So I'm going to go ahead and name this sheet. Okay, so let's call this distribution of ages by distribution of ages of player ages. There we go. Okay, distribution of players' ages. So I am going to go into my data pane, and I want to do a distribution on age. Now, I'm going to show you that I'm going to run into a little bit of a hiccup, and then we're going to do a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation and show you why. So right now, for some reason, whoever created this data set, which was me, whoever created this data set decided that age was a dimension, all right? And they made it a discrete dimension. And a discrete dimension is going to give me a list when I put it up on the view. Now, that's fine if you want to break your data up by age, but it's not very helpful if I want to do a histogram, okay? So let's talk really quickly about what we need to know about the different types of data we have in our data pane so that we can use that data in our analysis, okay? All right, so we have dimensions, and several of you are probably already aware, you're used to using these words, and that's great. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So in all of my beginning courses, I always start with terminology to make sure that we're all talking the same language and aware of how Tableau uses that language, okay? So when we talk about dimensions, we're typically talking about text. All right, it's not always text. It could be numbers. We can have ID numbers, and you see that in the FIFA data. We can have ID numbers, and ID numbers could be used to differentiate one row of data from another row of data. All right, we're not going to do math on it. We're not going to add or average an ID number. We're using it to distinguish one one member of our data set from another. Okay. So dimensions are typically used as text. We typically use them for headers for our rows, column headers, or labels, maybe. And they describe our data. They're going to give us things like, locations. Where did this happen? They might talk about what happened. Was this let's see, now I'm trying to think in soccer terms. Okay, was this score by header? Was it a striker score? Was it a defensive score, right? Who made the score, or who made the goal, right? That's what we're looking for. And so Tableau uses this descriptive data to help us understand what the values mean. All right, so dimensions are going to be those data members that describe our data. It could be time and place. Dates are also dimensions, okay? And we're typically not doing math on dimensions. Now we can, because we can use aggregated dimensions in order to cluster our data in certain groupings, but typically we're not finding the average of, or the sum of some dimension, right? However, I just showed you that we could do a count. So, so I say usually because there is no hard and fast rule. Typically, we're not doing math, but we can. Dimensions, though, are going to give us those by statements, and you saw that already in our the names that we gave to our tabs, right? We looked at distinct count of players by nationality. And so that by nationality was that dimension that I used to break up my data. It allows me to make comparisons between or among members of those dimension groups, right? Those fields. So we have dimensions, and I will say that Tableau Public is in version 2020.2. Okay, and this is kind of important to know, because if you, like me, we're not quite ready for 2020.2 because we're still working in something earlier. Tableau Public is in 2020.2, and the interface has changed quite a bit. Okay, so in the older versions, the dimensions were listed up in the top half of your data pane, and the measures, which we'll talk about in a second, were listed in the bottom half. Well, now that's not necessarily the case, because when we organize by either tables or we organize by folders, you can see that. Let me get my little drawing tool. I have a list up here. All right. These are my dimensions for the club info folder. And then I also have another section where these values for the club info folder. Okay. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. Where am I? There we go. All right, so dimensions are in the top half of that folder section. And again, they give us those by statements. We also have measures, and measures are typically, and I always quantify by, or qualify by saying typically, they're typically numeric, and that's because you can have non-numeric measures. You run across them every once in a while. So they're typically numeric because this is usually the value of the data that you're playing with. All right, so this might be a count, it might be the age, it could be the number of, or the average rating, right? If you're talking about financial data, it could be the sales values or the profit values, whatever those values are. They're usually numeric. So we're giving value to our data. And this is where the math happens. The math is actually kind of the defining feature of a measure. We're doing math on this value, and that is what makes it a measure. When you bring a measure onto your view, Tableau is going to default to sum. So it's going to go ahead and add everything up. Okay? All right. Now, let's talk about the colors, because this is very important. if I look back at my data, I want to point to the fact that many times when I hover over a dimension, they are blue fields, okay? And then many times when I hover over a measure, the measure is often green. It's not always green, and the dimensions are not always blue, okay? Now, let's talk about why that is. If I go back into my PowerPoint, we can talk about discrete values as values that allow us to slice and dice our data. So if you think about booleans, true or false, you have two choices. It's either true or it's false. There is no in between, right? There's no range of true or false. So a discrete value is going to give you some either or it's going to be a category of some sort. So we could have club names. You're not kind of in one club and kind of in another, or halfway in between. You're either in one or you're in another. So that's kind of the definition of discrete. So discrete data is going to belong to some member or another. And this is going to allow us to break up our data. It's going to give us buckets to view our data in. I can look at the total sum of our ratings by club, and the club is a discrete value. So I'm going to get a measure or a value for each club in my list. Okay? When I drag a blue, Tableau calls them pills, but they're fields. When I drag a blue field onto my view, I'm going to get either a header, a label, or a list. And you saw that when I dragged my blue dimensions onto my view. All right. We also have green fields, and those are continuous. And when you drag a continuous, oh, that formatting didn't work out. Sorry. It was supposed to be pretty too. The continuous field is going to give you a number line or a range, okay? And that range could include the entire range of values from that min to the max. So if we think about age, all right, you could be any age between birth, and we can make that the 0 point, any age between birth and death. And death could range anywhere from, well, it could be any number, right? Let's say that I live to be 90 years old. So my range of that age value could be anything from 0 to 90. The axis that we have on our view has the potential for all of those values in between that min and the max. It doesn't mean that they exist in the data set. It just means that they are possibly there. They can be present, okay? And so when we drag one of these green measures or green fields onto our view, we're going to get an axis, a scale, or a range. Okay, and we'll see that over the next couple of slides. All right, here is my caveat. I want to make sure that you don't let the colors fool you. This is really important. When I was kind of self-taught in Tableau. Roberto mentioned that I was working at the university when I first started using Tableau, and I was working on an accreditation project. I didn't have the support that I do now, which is an amazing level, but the Tableau community was phenomenal. I jumped right in, and they progressed my learning so far beyond what I would have been capable of doing on my own. And I was very lucky. Someone, one of my mentors, actually sent me an article about the color of the fields, the blue and the green. And I'll include this article in the final solutions workbook when I upload it to public. But it was instrumental in making sure that I knew the difference between those pill colors so that I could create appropriate charts. Because I'll be honest with you, and don't laugh, maybe laugh, don't laugh too long though. I couldn't build a line chart to save my life for probably 6 months because all I had was discrete data. And so I didn't realize what the problem was until I got the article. When we talk about the colors of those measure or the color of those fields, right? When we talk about the color of those fields, we need to be aware that we could have discrete dimensions, and those might be things like strings, but we could also have continuous dimensions. Things like, I don't know, maybe I'm using, well, actually, you know what, dates are a great opportunity or a great example. I can have a date field that's a continuous date field, but dates are always going to be dimensions. Okay? And I can also have a discrete measure. Now, a measure is something that we do math on, but if my math results in some kind of a string, like I'm doing math and then I either give these two examples up here. I have one example that's going to result in a discrete measure, or a discrete field, right? If the profit at the row level is greater than 0, then label positive, else negative, right? So any value that I'm looking at, if that value of profit is greater than 0, then it's going to be labeled as positive, otherwise it's negative. There's no math going on. I am just evaluating that data point and seeing if it's greater than 0. This continuous field, though, is going to be a measure because I'm doing math on it. So what I'm saying is that for whatever level of granularity or whatever I've got on the view, I want to add all the profits together and then take that sum of profit and compare it to 0. This is a measure because I'm doing math on my profit before I put it into my view. So I'm doing math on the profit and then I'm putting it into my view. That's going to make this a measure. I'm not doing math over on this side. That makes this makes this continuous, and then not doing math on it, it makes this one discrete. Okay? All right. So let me go back to our distribution of ages. Okay, so all of that was a discussion to talk about our age field. So we have this age field, and it is blue. And if this was one of my live classes, I would say, what does the blue field mean? But ask yourself, what does the blue field mean? The blue means that it is discrete. All right, so right now this is set up as a discrete number, more like an ID number. What I need it to be is actually a measure, because I want to use this as in a histogram, all right, to create bins in histogram. So I'm just going to take this age field, and this is kind of magic. So I'm going to click on age, and I'm just going to drag it down. And look, I get this little hint. The orange dimensions and measures pop up to let you know where the dimensions are in this player information and where the measures are. Let's see, I don't know if I can. Oh, I did it. Okay, yay. Sometimes my little tools work well. All right, so since I was dragging and I kind of froze my screen so I could show you this, I get this dimensions label and I get this measures label. So I was dragging age from the dimensions section to the measures section. Okay, let me do that again. And when I do that, it's going to Tableau is going to tell me which one's which. When I drop that age field into the measures section, it's going to convert to a measure. Okay, let me do that one more time. I'm going to left click on age and I can drag it down into my measure section and drop it. And it is now a measure. Let me show you one more way, because this is actually kind of cool. I can, remember I said if you don't know what to do, always right click. I can right click on my age field and I can convert it to a measure right here in this menu. So if you don't know what to do, right click and you'll get this menu option. So convert to measure. And it's going to pop it down into your measures. Now notice it also popped it into a green field, so now it's continuous, okay? And that's really what I need it to be. I need it to be a continuous field. I want to create bins for age, so let's right click on age, okay? I'm going to right click on age, and if I look down my list, the 5th choice down is create. And I have several choices here. We're going to use create bins, okay? When I do that, I'm going to get a dialog box. And I love dialog boxes because they give me lots of control over what I'm doing. So again, I right-clicked on age, I hovered over create, and I chose bins. I'm going to look and see that there is the min age is about 16. I get a little bit of information about my the values in this field. So my min age is 16, my max age is 47. I'm just going to go ahead and create bins that are about 5 years each. Okay, so I've got the field name, and I can use age bin. I like to add the size of my bin into the name. So I'm going to click inside of that little parentheses and give myself a space, and I'm just going to put a 5 in there. And so what I'm going to end up with is this age bin 5, and that's just to remind me that I have a 5-year span in my bins. Okay. All right, so I have size of bins. I converted that to 5, and I'm going to say OK. In my data pane, I notice now that I have this age bin 5, okay, and it kind of moved folders on me. So I'm going to, let's see if I can drag this up. I'm going to move it back to my player info. Let me undo and show you what I did again. I'm going to left click on this age bin 5. It just popped into another folder, and that's not a big deal. Actually, it didn't pop into a folder. It popped into a generic area down here that doesn't have folder locations. So I'm just going to take this age bin 5, left click, and I want to put it back in the player info where the age field is. Okay, so I'm just going to drop it up here. So I now have my continuous measure for age, and I have my age bins. So let's take our age bins, and we're going to put column headers for each one of those age bins. Okay, so I'm going to take age bin, left click, and drag it up to my columns shelf. And now I have a header, and it looks kind of funny right now. We'll fix it in a minute. But I have a header for 15 to 20, 20 to 25, 25 to 30, right? But because these are discrete, it's just giving me kind of that beginning number. So this is the 15 bucket, the 20 bucket, the 25 bucket, okay? Let's now count how many players, so in my name field, how many players do I have that fall within each age range? So we've done this before. We're going to right click on name. I want you to right click and hold. So we're going to right click and hold name and drag it to rows. The first time we did this, we just dragged it straight to rows and then changed the measure when we got it there. But I'm going to show you this shortcut. So again, I right click on name. Oops. I right click on name and drag with the right click being held until I get to my rows shelf. And when I let go, Tableau is going to ask me what I want to do. And here I can either use the string or I can do the min. And remember, this is alphabetical because it's a string. So it's going to give me the first name in the alphabet or the last name in the alphabet. I can do a count, and it's going to count every instance of every name. So if names are in there more than once, you'll get more than one count. But the count distinct, again, is the one that I want. I want to count each name one time. So I'm going to choose count distinct, and I'm going to say OK. All right. Now, we get the beginnings of a histogram, and this actually is a histogram, but it's kind of hard to read. It's not what we're used to seeing. We have this bin down here that says 15. We have another bin that says 20. And what I want to see is 15 to 20 in a range, because that's what this bin is. It's all of those ages that are within the range of 15 to 20, right? So what I need actually is a continuous axis down here at the bottom to show me every value that's possible within this range between 15 and 47 or whatever it was. So if I right click on my age bin 5, that field that's up in my columns, I can right click and I can choose to change my axis from displaying as a discrete axis where I have those buckets of data to a continuous axis. Now this doesn't change the data, it just changes the way that the axis or the header displays. So instead of having discrete headers, I now want to have a continuous axis. Okay? So again, right click on that age bin 5 in the column shelf and choose continuous to show which axis, or to change it to a continuous axis. This is more what we're used to seeing, right? So now I can look at my axis and I can see that this bin goes from 15 to 20, and then from 20 to 25. Now, here's the benefit of having data visualization, right? I could have a text table. And, if we have enough time, well, actually, you know what? I will do this in a few minutes. Oh, actually, I could do this. Let's see. Let's say that I give you an Excel document, because I get asked for tables of data all the time, and you probably do too. And you will when you get into your career if you haven't started already. People will come to you and say, just give me the data. I just want to see it in a table. Well, really, they probably don't. They think that they do, but they probably don't. Because if I gave you this table and I said, all right, what's the average age? They would have to do some kind of a calculation in order to find it, right? They can't just glance at it and say, okay, well, the average age is this, or the most common age is X. They don't know that from this data. They have to do the work in order to get the answer, right? However, if I give them a histogram and I say, what's the distribution of ages? What's the most common age range within this data set? Within seconds, your user can look and say, oh, okay, it's somewhere between 20 and 25. It takes almost no thought because I can see that this bar is bigger. And so that's, in a really quick little example, the benefit of data visualization. People can, without really even having to think about it, identify a bar that is bigger than the others. And so they can answer the questions pretty easily. So we've just created a histogram, all right? You've also created a bar chart. So congratulations, you've just done 2. And I've talked a lot. So you've done 2 in less than an hour. And this was one of the magic moments for me. I was working with data for 2 months in that accreditation project that Roberto mentioned, and it took me forever to get any data analyzed because I was working with just Excel, and I am not an Excel master. I had Tableau for 2 hours, and in 2 hours I was able to reproduce all of the work that took me 2 months to do with Excel. I was sold immediately, and it was this kind of quick analysis that I was able to do. All right, let's do a couple of questions. So I was looking at our Manchester United data, right? And I had this sum of the total ratings. And I'm kind of curious. I've got Manchester United with a really large sum score, right? And then I've also got the smallest score is the Bray Wanderers, right? That's the sum of all of those total, or all of those overall rating scores. But I want to know if this is a fair comparison, okay? So let's kind of look at this a little bit deeper. Let's start a new worksheet. So click on the little new worksheet icon. And let's look at the roster size. I want to see how many players I have in each club that are on their roster, right? So let's look at roster numbers by club, okay? All right, now I've said that the by statement tends to be our dimension, okay? We're breaking things up by club. So I'm going to take this club field and I want to drag this to my rows. I'm going to get that list of clubs again, okay? And then I want to know roster numbers. And really what I mean by that is the number of players. So how many players do we have per club? Now this is, again, something that we just did. So I'm going to take the number of names, or I'm going to take this name field, and I want to count how many names I have in each club. That's going to tell me how many players I have on their roster, okay? So I'm going to right-click on name, and this time instead of dragging it to the column shelf, I'm actually purposefully going to make a table. I just want a table of numbers. So I'm going to drag name to that ABC area. All right, I call it the ABC area because it's the only place that the ABC shows up. So when I say it, everybody knows what I'm talking about. I'm going to drag this to the ABC area, and when I do, and I drop it on, Tableau is going to say, what do you want to do? And I'm going to choose to do a count distinct of the name. So again, I'm getting that count of names. Okay, and then I'm going to say OK. And now I have a list of numbers. Now, I don't know if you find this exciting, but I do. We just created a table. This is our first table. Congratulations. Yay. So I just said that people ask for tables, and we don't want to give them tables. We want to give them those visualizations. But sometimes we need a table. I just want to know what the big number is and the small number is, and I'm still doing my exploration. Okay? So I've got this count of names on my roster. And I can already see that I have a problem because they're all different. Okay? Let's go ahead and sort. And I'm just going to sort biggest to smallest. And I can see that I've got some clubs that have 33 members on their roster. Oh, and there's Manchester United. Okay? These are alphabet. Well, they are reverse alphabet. Okay? So they're the reverse alphabet, but they're also sorted by the biggest to small. So I've got Manchester United here with 33 roster names. And then if I do a reverse of that sort, so if I sort ascending, little to big, I can see that Adelaide United has 20. Now that's not really a fair comparison if I'm doing the sum of those roster numbers. Okay, so let's look at a couple of options. My first option might be to, instead of doing a sum, I might want to average those numbers. Okay, so let's start a new worksheet. And we're going to create another bar chart. And this time we are going to do an average instead of the sum. Okay, so let's just take our name and put it on rows. So the name field, club field. We're going to put the club field on rows and get that list of clubs. Okay, club field on rows, and then we are going to take the where'd it go? Club field of rows, and then we're going to take that club total overall rating. Now there's two ways that you can do this. I want the average instead of the sum, and you've kind of already seen both ways. I'm going to left click and drag first that field to my columns because I want it to make a bar chart. So I'm going to drop it on my columns and I get the bar chart. Again, it jumped to sum because the default aggregation is going to be sum. I can right click on that field pill that's in my columns shelf, and I can change my measure from sum to average. Let's try that. Let's see what happens. All right. So now I can sort, and when I sort, I can see that Barcelona's football club is the top by average overall rating of the players. Okay. And so this is a little bit more of a kind of a fair comparison. However, I tend to get in the weeds a lot, and I look at this and I'm like, okay, well, I've got 33 people on the biggest rosters and 20 on the smallest rosters, and the likelihood that they're going to have players on, playing during a game, especially a high stakes game, that are from the lowest ranked end of their roster, it's kind of slim. You'd have to have several people hurt in order for someone to be substituted up, right? And so I'm thinking, okay, let's just go with the top 20 players. I want to see within each club who are the top 20 players for each club. Okay, so I've actually already done this for you. Let's look at that top 20, because what we're going to do is we're going to use that top 20 rank to filter out our data so that we're only looking at the top 20 players for every single club. And that's just kind of a way to normalize. So in my mind, I'm looking at that going, okay, well, if I pull the top 20 players, that means that those are the top 20 that are the rosters are probably going to be feeding a game. Just kind of another way to normalize. So I'm going to start a new sheet. Okay, actually, let's see. Let's name that sheet. Well, mine's sheet 6, yours probably 5 maybe. Let's name that sheet where we had the average club total, and let's call that one average overall total rating by club. Okay. Like I said, I'm bad at following my own advice, so I'm going to name this average overall total rating. All right, let's now look at our players. Now this is a way that we can kind of identify different traits. Okay, so I'm going to drag my players' names onto my rows shelf, and I'm going to say yes, I want to see all of them. Okay, and I'm telling you that I've already done this. I'm going to show you how to do this calculation because this is a fun one. But I'm going to show you that I've already created this for you. So I'm going to take this overall rank by team. Okay, and I'm just going to put this in a table format. So let's click on the overall rank by team and drag it to that ABC area. Okay. All right, it is a sum. In theory, the sum and the average of that number should be the same because I should have one row per player and one score per player. Let's just test that. And let's take this sum and let's make it an average instead. I want to see if that number stays the same. So let's pay attention to that top one and maybe the next one, and we're just going to change this to an average. Oh, it doesn't. Okay, so we have multiple values. That means that I've got duplications somewhere of the names. So let's use that average instead. Okay, so we're going to use average instead, and that's going to give me that average player rating. Okay, and actually what that should do is give me what I'm looking at is, let's see, down here they've changed it, and so I apologize. I feel like I'm like having to look a little bit too hard. It used to be called count of, or what was it called? Now that I'm looking at it this way, I can't remember the other way. It was number of records. That's what it was. So it used to be called, in the older versions, it's number of records, but in 2020.2, it is now called this. And so what we can do is we can have this, let's see, transformed data should be where that overall rating is coming from. So I'm just going to drag this into my view, and I can see that I have 2 records for Abbas. All right, and then Abdallah has 1, and that kind of helps me understand that that's why I had 26 for my sum, but only 13 when I do an average. It's because I've got 2 records for him, and then I've got several others that have multiple records. So if you're ever unsure if you have duplications in your data, you can add that. Now it's called a count. Okay, you just need to know where the data come from. You can do that that count of records in order to find out how many rows you have. So I'm going to use the average just so that I can get the actual value of each of those records because it's the same. Okay, let's see, where were we going with this? Oh, so this is the rank. So what I can see here is that this player right here is ranked 13 out of his club. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pull off that count. And so we've got this player here is ranked number 13 in his club. And so what I'm going to do now is I want to see each club separated from the others. So I'm going to add a second dimension level to my list. So let's take club and put it in front of name. All right, and now I can see that for Heidenham, I've got these different players. And if I sort this from small to big, I should see a rank of 1 through, and I do, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to number 26. They've got 26 people on their roster. Okay? All right. I only want to compare the first 20 when I do that overall sum. So what I'm going to do is I am going to, let's see, I'm going to take this overall rank by team. Okay, and there's a couple ways I could do this. I've already created this overall rank by team. I can take this and put it on filter. Okay, and if I put it on the filter, remember I said that I wanted to use that average because there are duplications in my data. I'm going to use this average, and I'm going to say next, and then I can choose to show only numbers 1 through 20. Okay, that's going to be 1 through 20 of my data, or of my players. So if I say OK, I have now created this filter, and I can look and I can see that every club is going to give me that first 20 players. So there's my first 20 for all of those players. Okay, so there's one way. Like I said, I've already done this for you. So let's now look at the clubs, and let's go back and do that overall calculation again. Okay, I'm going to take name off, and I'm going to take that average overall off. I still have my filter, so each one of my players that's showing up for each club, or that's included in the data for the club, is now only going to include those top 20 players. So now I want to take this club total overall rating, and I want to drop that on my columns shelf. Okay, now this is the sum of those players' ratings, but only for the top 20, because we've got that as our filter. So I'm going to sort this. Okay, and now we start to see that we've got an interesting, even different. Oh, I'm not at the top, that's why. There we go. I was looking for Manchester and it wasn't there. All right, so we can now see that if we go to the top of our list, we have Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal. All right, so we've got our top players, or our top clubs, and those are based on those top 20 players on the roster, because like I said, in my mind, those are the ones that are more likely to be put on the field. Okay? All right, we can also, let's see, let's look at our top, let's create another filter. And this time I want to create a filter and allow my user to play around with my data a bit. Okay, so I want to say, I want to look at the top clubs from this view, right? From this view right here, I want to see the top 10 clubs, and I want to exclude everything else. So what I want to do is I'm going to drag club to my filter, and now I get a different interface. Okay, now the interface that I got with that overall rating, that was based on a measure, and since we had a range of numbers, we got a filter that was a range of numbers, and now we're looking at a dimension. This club is just a list of club names, and so the first option we have in our filter is a list of club names. So I could exclude manually if I wanted to. I don't want to do that. I also could do a wildcard, okay? Or I could do a conditional statement. But what I want to do is a top in statement. And then I'm going to allow my user to interact with it. So I've got my top in, and I'm going to say that I want to see the top 10 of my clubs, and I want to see the top 10 based on this total overall rating sum. Okay, and that's the measure that I've got on my view. So I've got this total overall rating sum, and I'm going to say okay. And now I have this list of the top 10 clubs based on that overall rating, and it comes from that overall ranking of the top 20 players. Okay, so it's calculated based on the top 20 players for each club. All right, let's see. So just for fun, let's create a parameter. Okay, I want to provide a way to change the number of clubs shown in this list for my user. So let's say that my user maybe wants to look at the top 20 instead of the top 10. All right, I want to provide that option for them. So I'm going to create a parameter, and we're going to click up here in the top, and I'm actually going to teach you a couple of little tricks here. So this create parameter is going to allow me to let my user do some inputs. Okay, so a parameter is just a way of giving my user control. So I'm going to create a parameter, and I'm going to name this parameter. And because I want to provide this to my user, I'm going to go ahead and do something actionable as a title. So I'm going to say select the top in of clubs. Okay. All right. So we want them to select the top N, and that top N is going to be a whole number, so it's going to be an integer. Okay. And I could give them a range if I wanted to, or I could just give them the ability to say all. For right now, let's go ahead and make this a range just so that we can kind of control it. So I'm going to say that they could select anywhere from 3 to, yeah, the top 100 would be fine. They'd have to scroll a bit, but we could do that. Okay. All right. So I'm going to say OK. And then I need to show this parameter. So there's a three-step process. We're going to create a parameter. We're going to show the parameter. And then we're going to use the parameter. Okay, so create, show, and use. And I always put show as second because if I don't, then I forget to show the parameter, and then I can't remember why things aren't working. So always show the parameter. So I'm going to right-click on this parameter down here in the bottom, and you can see that it populates down in the bottom of my data pane. Okay, so down here I've got this new parameter, and it is called select the top 10 of clubs. So I'm going to right-click, and at the very top of that list, I see show parameter. So I'm going to show the parameter, and it's going to populate over in the right-hand side of my view. Now, for me, it shows up right here. My user, if I showed them this worksheet, it would show up on the right-hand side also, and they would be able to interact with it. Okay? All right, let's go in and let's edit this, edit this club filter so that instead of the top 10, we're going to use the top N parameter, and we can make changes. So let's right-click and edit. Okay. Oh. You know what I did? I think I did this backwards, didn't I? Nope, there it is. Okay, so I am going to, instead of top 10, I want to use that parameter, there it is, in my list, to select the number that I'm going to insert into this value here. Okay, so let me show you one more time. I created my parameter, I showed my parameter, and then I went up to the club filter. I right-clicked and I chose Edit. And then I'm going to, instead of 10, instead of hard coding it for 10, I'm going to say use this select the top N of clubs parameter. Okay, and now I can say OK, and my number started at 3. That was what I put as my min. And now I can actually click through and I can show different values or different numbers of top players or top clubs. Okay, and just a really quick little aside, I've got this little presentation button up in the toolbar. If I click on this presentation button, this is what my user is going to see if I shared this out with them now. If I put this on Tableau Public or shared it out in some other way, they're going to see this bar chart and they're going to see this interface. Okay, so if you're ever unsure what your user is going to see from the view you've created, you can use that presentation button. If you hit escape, it'll take you back to your workbook view. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's look at creating. Let's create that. What do I want to do? I want to create this filter as a calculated field. All right. So I showed you how to do the top rank as a range filter, but I want to show you how to create a calculated field, and with that calculated field we can have this in our data, and then I can just pull that on anytime I want to. Okay, so again, since I have that overall rank by team already created in my data, I can just create a calculated field. All right, so let's do one real quick. Let's start a new chart. Let's name this one first. So I'm going to double click on sheet whatever the sheet number in your workbook is. And I am going to say top in clubs, nope, top in rating, sorry, top in ratings by club. That's what it is. Okay. All right, let's start a new worksheet. And let's go ahead and grab, let's see. Let's go ahead and grab our club and put it on our rows. And this time, let's look at the amount of money that they are paying to their players, okay? And we can look at it, I've got it set up as a weekly amount or a yearly amount, all right? So let's just look at the yearly salary of each one of the players by club. But I want to look at it for those top 20 players. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this yearly wages, all right, this measure, I'm going to drag it to my columns. I'm going to go ahead and sort. Okay, now remember, this is not filtered yet. So this Barcelona has got, I believe, 33 players or something like that. And so this is the sum of their yearly wages for all 33 players. And so what we want to do is we want to do this for just the top 20. Okay, so we also have those overall ranks that we've assigned to each one of the players. And so let's take and create a calculated field. So I am going to click on this little drop down arrow. We've clicked on it once, a couple times before actually. So this little drop down arrow right here is going to allow me to create a calculated field. And that's going to add a new field into my data in the workbook. Okay, so click here, we're going to create a calculated field. And I've already created one, but I'm going to show you how to do it. Let's call this one top 20 players by team. Okay, so top 20 players by team, and then I'm going to put a little parentheses just to do a true, false, so that I remember which one this is. Okay, and I'm going to say, let's see, I want to say that the average rank, because remember we said that some of them had duplicates, so I want to get that average, and that way I get the value of each row. Okay, so I'm going to say that that average overall rank by team is less than 20, and that gives me that top 20. So I can drag overall rank by team onto my calculation window. Okay, and I get this overall rank by team, but I need to tell Tableau that I want the average of, because otherwise it's going to try to add them all up. Okay, so I want the average, and then I'm going to wrap that in a parentheses. Let me make that bigger so you can see it. Okay, so I want the average, I'm going to wrap it in a parentheses, and then I'm going to close the parentheses. Notice that overall rank by team is orange, and that is letting me know that that is one of my fields. Okay, my average, my aggregation is blue. All right, and then the calculation that I want to do is that average overall team, or ranking, right, is going to be less than 20. And so this is going to give me a true or false. It either is less than 20 or it's not less than 20. And so I'm going to say OK. And this field's going to populate down in this bottom section. Okay, and I can actually drag this back up to my player info. Or actually, I guess I want to put it up in my club info because that's where it needs to be. So let's take this field, just left click on it and drag it up to your club info area. Okay. All right. Notice that we have the filter that I created originally, which is in the dimensions section, and then this one that we just created is in the measures section. Okay. We'll talk about that in a second too. Let's take this measure. All right, it's blue because it's discrete. Remember, and it's discrete because it's a true or false. Let's take that and put it on filters. Okay. Now, I want to say that I want the true values because I don't want the ranks that are greater than 20. I want the ones that are less than 20. And I'm going to say OK. Okay. And now I should have only those players that are less than 20 on the ranking system. Okay. Now it doesn't look like it changed much, does it? I have to figure out why. It may be that maybe the data only has those top 20 for the wages. We'll have to investigate that further. All right, so we've got that filter here, and it is filtering only those top 20 on rank. And what I can do to verify that, and I am an advocate of verification, I can take the name field. If you left click on that name field and drop it onto your rows, add the members, okay? And then I can take that overall rank by team, and let me show you a little trick. Let's say that I want to take this overall rank. I want to put it up here, but I want it to be a column like a dimension. Because remember, I put a dimension on my view, and I'm going to get a label, a list or a header, right? But if I take a green continuous value and put it on my view, I'm going to get some kind of a axis or range because I'm going to get a bar or some measure type. So I'm going to take this rank and I am going to right click on it, and I'm going to convert it to discrete for just a second. We'll fix it in a minute. Okay, for right now I want it to be discrete. Drag that up to your rows, okay, and change that back to average. So measure to average, right click on that pill up on your rows, change that measure to average. Okay, and then let's do a sort, and I'm going to sort the view based on this pill. So I'm going to sort. So right click on that average overall rank and choose sort by, that's not the one that I want. Oh, sorry, click on the header. Please do it the other way. There we go. If you hover over the header, you get that little average. You get the sort icon also, and then you can control that particular column. So I clicked on the little icon and clicked it twice because the first time it's going to go descending order, the second time it's going to go ascending order. All right, and I can see that, my filter's working, but I made a mistake, didn't I? So instead of getting 20, I actually got 19 of my players. So what I can do is let's go in and let's edit that. All right, so I want to change this so that it is less than or equal to. So let's right click on this top 20 players by team, that true false calculation that we just did. And when you right click, you get the edit choice. Okay, choose edit, and this time we're going to say instead of less than 20, I want this to be less than or equal to 20, and that way I get that 20th member. Okay, notice that I have this calculation is valid. This is important for your calculated fields. If I do something and mess up, like I forget to close one of my parentheses, Tableau is going to give me this error message. And that error message is going to attempt to tell me where my problem is. Okay, I might have a missing parentheses, or I might have a comma missing if I was going to be adding additional things to a list, or to some the syntax, if the syntax of a function required a comma. So it's going to try to point to the problem. So I am going to add my little parentheses back in, and then I'm going to say OK. And when I do that, now I have that top 20 again. Okay. All right, so we just created a calculated field. So let me show you that one more time. I'm just going to go through the steps really quickly. All right, I clicked on the little drop-down arrow at the top of my data pane, and I created a calculated field. I named my field. I did my function. All right. And then this is actually something that I'm going to point to because this is a really important feature of Tableau. This little expansion arrow right here. If you aren't sure about the function that you want, there is a whole list of functions right here, this little helper box. So if I was going to play around with dates, I could type date in here and I get a list of all of the different date functions. Okay. If I was doing sums, I could find the different sums that I have. Okay. All right, so these are different functions, and Tableau is going to give you an explanation of the function and an example of the syntax. All right, so this is a very helpful feature. This little, if it's not there when you go and open your dialog box, just remember that that little pop-out arrow will open it up, and then if you want it gone and out of your way, you can go ahead and close it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close it. All right, so let me close this. All right, so we are working in Tableau Public. You guys have learned a lot today, actually, and several advanced steps that are way beyond, like into day 5 of a Desktop 1 class. So you've done some parameters, which that's pretty cool, and you can do all kinds of things with parameters. So once you know the 3 steps, remember that it's create the parameter, show the parameter, and then use the parameter. So those 3 steps will get you really far with using parameters, and that's a good way for you to provide interaction for your users. Okay, so you've created a parameter. We've also created a calculated field, and both of those were done using this little drop-down arrow. Okay, so with the calculated field, you can create all kinds of different fields. You can do dimensions, you can do measures, you can add and divide and come up with ratios, all kinds of stuff. So you can create this calculated field. We've done one of those. And there are several different examples in this data set of things that, you know, maybe I've created or added for you. Okay, and then when I do a solutions, I'll add some more stuff to it also. We've also done a top-in filter, which again is another one of those advanced topics that's really useful. So you can look at those top-ins, and I embedded that parameter into that top-in so that our users can interact with that parameter, or I could. We looked at changing our measures from the default sum. If I need to change it to something else, I can right-click on the pill that is up on the view, and I can change that aggregation. Okay. We have created a table. We've also created a histogram. We've created several bar charts, and we've done some investigation to see what's going on in our data. We didn't really talk about the marks card, but there's a lot of stuff you can do with it. Let's say that I want to just kind of color the nationalities, and this is going to be an ugly chart. But I can see every single member using that color. I would never use this as a visualization, but as an exploration, it's kind of interesting to see. All right. All right. The last thing that I want to do is show you how to save this work if you're using Tableau Public. So in Tableau Public, when you're using the Tableau Public app, it is free. One of the limitations is that you can't save a workbook to your desktop. You actually do need that profile. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to go up to this file in the menu, and oops, sorry, my hands twitched. All right, I'm going to save to Tableau Public, and I can either do a save to Tableau Public or a save to Tableau Public as. And if you think about any of the file savings that we do on our computer, we can save or save as. I like using save as the first time, and I have a lot of control there. But once you've created a workbook, you can just continue to save that workbook back to Tableau Public. Okay, so I'm going to do a save as, and Tableau is going to give me this dialog box. It's going to ask me what I want to call it. Okay, and I'm going to name it. So this one is my beginner workshop analysis with the solution. You won't see it right now because it's going to publish as a hidden view. But once I unhide it, after I add some stuff to it, some resources that I want to share with you, then you will be able to see it on my public page. Okay, so I'm going to click Save. And I already have this in my view, and so I'm going to say, yes, I want to override it. It's going to save those changes to this new new view. If I don't want to override it, I can add a number to the back, like a version, and I can save it that way, and then it won't override. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, I want to override it. And it is going to save to Tableau Public. There we go. All right. And so we have this now on our public page. Okay. A couple of things to know. You have this little reminder. You've published it. Congratulations. You just published your, if you did this along with me, you just published your very first viz. So yay, congratulations. We can change the title, we can give it a description, and we can say thank you to those who inspired this visualization. And that's really important in the Tableau community. If you are creating a work that's based on somebody else's work, it's always a good idea to go ahead and call them out on that and say, thank you for this, thank you for the inspiration. Let them get credit for being an inspiration to you and your work. It's just a really good way to give back and thanks to the community. Okay, so I can edit the details underneath my view, and I can change my title. I can add the inspirations and a description. Okay, I can also control the different controls that I have here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this, and then I want to show you what it looks like when you've got something hidden or not. So this is the view that you guys can see. And notice that even though I'm looking at it as me, it doesn't have that little hidden icon showing up. The hidden view, when I come off of it, does have that little hidden icon showing. Okay. And so you can see that it's hidden here and not hidden there. I've got mine set as a default to hide things until I show them. I can see what others see on my profile by clicking others, and now I can see that the one that I've got not hidden is now available. Okay? I have had so much fun today, and I hope that you have too. I love teaching Tableau. If you get the opportunity to take a Tableau class, take it. 2 days in a classroom, 8 hours a day. It sounds like a lot, and it's like drinking from a fire hose. It really is, because there's so much information available to you that you can learn. There's so much out there on Tableau. The Tableau community is very active. So here are kind of some top tips. I've got a couple of minutes left, so I'll use that to kind of share a little bit of my experience. I joined the Tableau community. I followed some people on Twitter that were very active in the community. It was a great accident. I didn't know what I was doing. I was new to Twitter. I had no idea what I was doing. So I followed some people, and they just happened to be amazing community members. They have welcomed me into the community and offered up mentorship and support along the way. So my entire where I am right now is all because of that Tableau community. So if you are not yet a member of the Tableau community, join. Find people. Reach out for mentorship. It is a great way to learn. Get involved on Tableau Public, share your stuff, ask for feedback, and then iterate. It's always a good idea to get feedback and then make improvements and show people that you have learned from their feedback. There are a lot of community programs. There's Makeover Monday and Workout Wednesday. If you like sports, there's I think it's Sports Biz Sunday, or maybe it's a monthly Sports Biz. Sorry, guys. But there are lots of things out there that you can do based on what you're interested in. So get involved in those community activities. So let's see. All right, I guess that's pretty much what I've got for us. Hopefully you learned a lot today, and it's a 2-hour workshop. That's not much time, so we booked it, and I really enjoyed working with you today, so thank you.
There we are. Thank you so much for that awesome presentation, Michelle. But I can say it's not often that we get the chance to learn Tableau not only from a Tableau professional, but from someone who also holds such advanced degrees in education. I'm
well, thank you.
100% sure the audience was enthralled and thrilled and enjoyed every single minute of it. For the time being, I'd like to welcome you now to your very own DSGO Live Q&A. The way it works is attendees will send questions through the chat. I'll receive them and I'll ask them to you. So, attendees, you know what to do. Send your questions through the chat. Michelle, we have a first question coming in from Noah Horsley. He asks, any suggestions on who to follow?
Yes. And it's going to sound like I have favorites, and oh, this is terrible. Okay, so first and foremost, so that I'm not calling out necessarily specific people, here are some groups. Any of the Zen Masters, absolutely follow the Zen Masters. You will learn more than you ever want to know about Tableau. They are proven experts in Tableau. I have quite a few friends that are Zen Masters. They have taught me so much. It's amazing. Let's see. And from there, follow the featured authors. Those featured authors that are displayed on the Tableau gallery, they are amazing at doing visualizations, and they are recognized for their skills. They put out a lot of work that is very inspirational. So definitely those Tableau authors. And then if you see people that are just really active on Tableau, on Twitter or on the public forums or on Tableau Public itself, follow them. If you see people that inspire you, follow those people. So I don't want to call out individuals because that does feel like favoritism. And find me on Twitter. I'm at LearnVisWithMe. And you will see that I have got so many people that I follow a lot of web developers too. So I have Tableau people, I've got web developers, I've got a lot of tech people. So you can look through my follows and find some amazing inspiration for Tableau. Roberto, I need to close my shade. I never even thought about the sun going down right about now. Hold on one second.
Don't worry. Well, I'll reiterate this chance. Attendees, again, any questions you have, feel free to ask them. We're here just for you. This was a wonderful, wonderful Q&A, wonderful presentation, and, well, we have quite a nice Q&A going. Michelle, there's another question coming in from Edison Lamb. The question is, how do you freeze your screen and draw arrows in your presentation?
That's a great question. All right, so, and I'm still not, I mess up all the time. I'm lucky I didn't do any squiggle lines today because I always do a squiggle line. There is a little program called Zoomit, Z-O-O-M-I-T. And if you look up Zoomit on Google, it's this tiny little package. And, we use it because it's so small and it doesn't really have any demand on our systems. And it's just this really quick little control. I have mine. I got fussed at by my technology people because I used a control prompt that he needed for something else to fix a problem with my computer. But I use a control and control right arrow is how I have mine programmed. And so when I hit control right arrow, it's going to instigate that program and it does that control freeze. And you can actually write on the screen also using a text. So it takes a few minutes to get used to. It took me about 3 weeks, and then I started getting more proficient with it, but it's a great feature. But yeah, Zoomit, and it's just this little teeny little package.
All right. Well, thank you, Michelle. We have a question coming in from Lucas Diaz. He says, great starter course, Michelle. Any Viz guidelines you think everybody should know? Yes, and if I had all day with you guys, we would have so much fun. Oh my gosh. Okay, so here are a couple of guidelines. One, you want to give your user the message that you're trying to get across. So that means using that sorting that we did to put the highlighted information at the top. So if you want to know what the biggest number is, put the biggest number at the top. If you want to know the smallest number, put the smallest number at the top. Use that sorting to help you. Also, use filters to help you get the message across. If you want to focus in on the top 10 clubs, then filter out the rest. You don't need all the noise. You need those top 10 clubs to show up, okay? So sorting and filtering, that's a really good way to get your message across. Use titles with descriptive names, and then even subtitles that give a call to action. Click on this to filter, or highlight these to do whatever, or the bars represent sales, or the circles represent profit, or whatever it is. Use your titles and your subtitles to inform your user and get that message across. And then use color judiciously. I see so many visualizations with the pie charts are the notorious ones, 150 slices and 150 different colors. We cannot process that kind of information overload in a visual form. So if you are using colors in your chart, use no more than like 7, I think. 7 or 8 is pretty much the extent of our visual capabilities to distinguish between colors. To me, that still looks like a bag of Skittles exploded on my screen, so I really don't like to even use that many. I am an advocate of Grayscale. So Grayscale is your best friend. It's really actually very beautiful on a visualization when you have a grayscale with just a pop of color. So use color purposefully to highlight information or to alert people maybe. So that's kind of probably the biggest things. Keep your information concise, get your point across, and then be very careful and purposeful with color. So maybe that's my top 3.
All right. Well, wonderful tips. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
We have a question coming in from Daniel Hall. He asks, can you go over the new Tableau data model?
I can next week. This week, not yet. You remember how I said that I was used to teaching and working in one of the newer versions? I haven't actually gotten to go in and play in 2020.2 yet. So I've goofed around just a little bit with the data. You saw where I created that data model, kind of. It uses this relationship that Tableau creates to make connections between the different tables in your data, which is really amazing. That's awesome. But I haven't gotten to dig in more than that. So but my company, Interworks, just put forth a webinar, and they did go deep into that data model for the 2020.2 release. So go to the interworks.com page, look up their webinars, and you'll find an amazing, it had this huge number of live participants at that webinar. So anyway, next week, that's my goal, is to go in and investigate the new data model. I have not been able to do it yet, so I'm excited about that. I never want to stop learning, so that's one of the benefits of this job. There's always something going on that I can, pick up new information. So, I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for you.
Well, that's always a great answer as well. We have another question coming in from Sophia. She asks, how do you embed a Tableau dashboard on your own website?
Okay, that's a good one. So there is, let's see, let me pull up, make sure I give you the right steps. You know what? I haven't done that in so long now. It's been 6 months at least since the last time that I embedded one in a website. But you know what I'll do? I'll include those steps on the workbook that I published, that solutions workbook. I'll include that because I probably need to show you a screenshot anyway. That's a great question. So yeah, I will include that as information on that solutions workbook to show you how to do that. It's fairly easy, but like I said, I haven't done it in about 6 months. So I'll have to go back and look.
All right. We have another question coming in from Gabriel Reyes. He asks, how clean must the data be to use it on Tableau?
Actually, all right, so when I first started using Tableau, I did not have clean data. It makes it more difficult, but you can clean and transform your data once you get into Tableau. There's also Tableau Prep, which is available, and it's a data cleanser. So, I mean, it works well to do transformations. I kind of got to the point where I can do a lot of the transformations that I need in Tableau, so I haven't really used Tableau Prep as much as I used to. It's best if your data is clean, but if it isn't clean, you can transform it. There are times when I just take data, transform it, and stick it back into an Excel document, reconnect to that Excel document, transform it and clean it again, stick it back into the Excel document. So, I mean, there are ways that you can do this kind of circular transformation and cleaning process to get your data into a clean form, even using Tableau. If you have R or Python skills, you've got those. So you can do it that way even.
All right, great, wonderful. We also have a question from Manuel Casella. He asks, have you experienced any time an issue while loading CSV files where the data remains under one column without splitting into its respective comma-separated columns?
Not necessarily in Tableau. I mean, I run across that in Excel all the time. Let's see, usually, but if that does happen, you can actually do a transformation in your data pane. So if it comes across where each row has got the commas separating out the data, but it didn't go into different columns, you could actually do a split, so a transform split, and just do a split all, and that would actually divide everything out into new columns. Or you could do a calculated field. The easiest thing to do, honestly, is just to move that CSV file into an Excel file so that it's already delimited in that Excel file, and then when you pull it into Tableau, you'll get those columns. That's probably how I would do it, is just go ahead and transform it outside of Tableau.
Okay, wonderful, thank you so much. Now we have another question from Henry. Henry asks, can Tableau be integrated with multiple data sources?
Yes. So there's actually quite a bit of flexibility with the data connections that you have available in Tableau. You can do joins. Those of you who are familiar maybe with SQL, you can do joins and unions. You can do cross-database joins. And if none of those are an option, you also have a feature called blending. Of course, now, having said all of that, the new data modeling kind of takes that and makes it a lot easier, because Tableau will now make relationships, which is how I set up the data for this FIFA data set. They'll take and make relationships with those data sets, and so you actually have less complications, I think. It's not reverse. You can't go backwards in versions, so if you create a data model in 2020.2, you do have to use it in 2020.2. If you go back to 2020.1, you lose that data modeling. But you've got the ability to connect different data sources and use data from different sources to inform your views. So yeah, it's a really powerful feature.
Okay, awesome, thank you so much. We also have a question coming in from Stratos. The question is, well, first a comment, thank you for the workshop. Then
You're welcome.
the question starts, do you think Tableau should be used only by analysts or BI professionals, or should it be a tool that everyone knows, similar to Excel?
That is such a wonderful question. All right, so my entire goal as a Tableau trainer is to push self-service analytics. I am an advocate that people should have access to and be able to do the analysis that they want to do. And I don't think that you need to be a statistician or have a PhD, or it helps. It helps to understand the stats that you're doing and the data that you're using, but it's not a requirement anymore. Now we have this tool that lowers the barrier. I probably would not be doing this type of work now if I didn't have Tableau, because it did lower that threshold for me. I didn't have to be a Python programmer or know R in order to do data analysis. I was able instead to use Tableau to allow me to interact with data in a way that was probably unreachable before. And that on the fly, I don't know if you noticed, but as I was switching columns and headers and moving measures around, that's not something I can do easily with Excel. It's something that I can do easily with Tableau. So that ability to on the fly change the way that I look at data is very powerful, and Tableau lowers that threshold. So I think that everybody that uses it needs to have some basic data literacy skill and an understanding of what they're doing, because with great power comes great responsibility. But but I love the idea that anyone can go in and explore data, and it adds a layer of of truth and validity to the data that we are looking at, this information that's out there. You know, we're in an age of everyone has the ability to put a chart out. Well, that's great. But if it's not an accurate chart, I want to be able to verify that. And because I have Tableau, I usually can. I can come pretty close to verifying those numbers. And I think that's really important.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. There's another question coming in from John. John asks, after this, what would you think would be the next recommended step? Any books, blogs, specific trainings?
All right, so right now, Tableau actually has their e-learning platform. I'm trying to remember how long it is free. It started off as 3 months, so it might be through the end of July maybe, but their e-learning platform is free for right now. So get in, dive in, immerse, and learn all the things that you can, all the things, because it will teach you all the things. And so like I said, it's free for right now. There are several Tableau-centric books that are very helpful. Let's see. Okay, one of them is the Makeover Monday series. Let me see if I can get it in there. There we go. Oh, and I don't think I'm backwards. Yay. So the Makeover Monday series, or a book, is very good. It is based on the work that project has done over the past couple of years. Eva Murray and Andy Kriebel, they put out a weekly, well, it was Andy, and now it is Curtis. No, I completely drew a blank. I'm sorry. I feel terrible, and he's going to call me later and fuss at me. So anyway, Eva Murray is now one of the leads for that Makeover Monday, and they do a weekly data revamp. And so basically they put out a data set and maybe an original view and say, you know, let's see what you can come up with, and you do a rehash of that data. And it's a really great opportunity. So Josh Milligan also put together a Tableau book that I found very helpful. I'll find the link and put that one together, but that was early in my learning phase, so I actually don't have that one with me. So I'll put that one, I'll make a list, I'll put that in the workbook. I think that would be a great resource to have. So the e-learning platform is really great. Those community projects that I was talking about, that's a really good opportunity to get in and learn and just do. Find something that gives you an opportunity to get in and dig around in Tableau. The more you click, the more you're going to learn. If you take a class, that's wonderful. If you don't use it, you'll forget everything. So you have to go in and play around with it and learn. So great questions.
Yeah, the questions have been coming in nonstop, and each one is better than the previous. Right now, we have another question from Dennis. Dennis says, first of all, great presentation.
Thank you.
Then the question, could you share some best practices in terms of using Navigation Object, which became available in 2020, to create a seamless navigation pane to connect 15 plus dashboards?
15 plus dashboards. Oh, okay. Yes. So I think that what you're talking about is that the navigation button. And if that is what you're talking about, that's a really powerful feature. So it allows you to create connections between the different dashboards that you want to show information. Now, here's one of the things that I will say. People have a tendency to try to throw everything in the kitchen sink at a dashboard. And that's never a good idea, because you've got users that are overloaded with information. They don't know where to look. There's just too much. So if you're going to have 15 dashboards, hopefully the reason for that is that you've got a high-level summary as an introductory dashboard, and then maybe as people are using that dashboard and interested in digging into some aspect, they can then navigate to a more detailed dashboard. That would be a good use case for having dashboards linked together. Let's see. But yeah, it's we used to have to create buttons by creating sheets and using dashboard actions to connect those sheets between dashboards, but that navigation object now does that for us. So play around with it. It's a great opportunity. But again, remember that your view has got to be useful, get your message across, and not be overwhelming to your user. You want the view to actually help your user know how to navigate. I hope that answers that question.
All right. Well, I think we have time for one more question. Tina asks, I heard that Tableau is an expensive software for companies, and Power BI is becoming more popular for companies to use. Do you think this is true?
So I have not been involved in too many discussions, but I know that that has become a discussion. And I hear things like, yes, maybe the upfront cost for Tableau is more significant, but what I also hear is that overall, long term, Power BI also becomes expensive. So you kind of have to think about and put the long term costs into consideration and kind of think through more than just that startup, because what you could end up with is, you know, more users or longer term needs, or even more server space. And so you have to kind of balance that out. But Tableau is our preferred data visualization tool, and there's a reason for that. Tableau is just powerful, and it has the ability to be totally flexible and create beautiful work. I know that I'm over time, sorry. But I love Tableau. It is just one of those things. It's one of those tools that enthralls. It gets you captured in the abilities that it has. It allows for so much flexibility. And when you see what the authors do on Tableau Public, you're going to be blown away, because it's not just business dashboards. It's so flexible that you can do art pieces basically with Tableau, not just business uses. So, and I think because of that, that just kind of puts it over the edge for us.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for the Q&A. It has been awesome, and I think we can all agree it was a brilliant presentation and Q&A. Thank you once again for joining us, Michelle. It was a pleasure hosting you, and I hope to see you soon. We all hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your weekend, guys. Thanks.